Hey, welcome to the Daily AI Show, where we give you the latest information and news about AI. I'm joined today by Beth Lyons, Junmi Hatcher, Andy Halliday, and myself, Carl Ye. I know Brian Maurice is coming today, maybe. We're not quite sure. But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about model context protocol. And first of all, I'm kind of a little choppy. Is everybody seeing the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. But can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that's all that matters. So we're talking about MCP, and first of all, it's blowing up kind of on X, on YouTube, on where the normal people hang out and talk about AI. But let's start, I guess, Andy, let's start with, can you give us a brief overview of what MCP is for those who don't know?
Yes. Okay. So I consulted with Claude as a representative of Anthropic, and Claude chides me that it's not model context protocol. That appears to be a misinterpretation that gained circulation among the people who are talking about MCP. It was called model call protocol in Anthropic, and that's how Anthropic officially refers to it. And that helps explain what it is. It is simply a protocol that defines how an AI model can call external tools and services, similar to how function calling works. And we've seen that as a feature of OpenAI, function calling. And it's essentially a standardized way for AI models to request actions from external tools and receive responses. So why does MCP have to be there? Well, because LLMs, by their pre-training, are very powerful at understanding language and reasoning, but they lack the ability to directly interact with the outside world. And so, for example, Claude can't search the internet. And one of the complaints we've always had about Anthropic's Claude is it doesn't have web search. Well, MCP, Model Call Protocol, allows you to simply set up a call to an external web search provider, and then Claude has access to the internet forever, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. I think it's interesting for us to note the similarity between what N8N is accomplishing with their integration of an AI agent and tools that you can add to the tools agent version of that, and MCP. N8N has the very same feature, which is, okay, I can get a model, I can use OpenAI, I can use any of the others, and I can add the agent in the N8N workflow that is the tools agent, and I can add 50 tools that it can call upon. And that allows the model to then do any of those function calls, any of the tools that are available. Similarly, you can now add to Claude Desktop or any other model, including a local, personally hosted open source model. You can use MCP to add a range of functional tools to your LLM and allow the LLM to organize and orchestrate the use of those tools.
Perfect. So what I wanted to show today was a great explanation from Greg Eisenberg's YouTube channel. But before we get to that, because it's great, Andy, that you mentioned N8N, because we can kind of put the explanation on that context. But Junmi or Beth, do you have anything to add in terms of MCP itself?
I was just trying to pull up what you were going to show, because it should not come from you in your choppy connection. So when you're ready, let me know when you would like.
Oh, yeah. I was going to show
the one about the future.
No, I'm gonna show you the model context protocol. There's a specific like timestamp in there, so I'll just send it to you in our Slack. But Junmi, continue.
Yeah. So when I heard about MCP, the light bulb or thing that really motivated me or got me going about it was the fact that it's trying to be standard, right? It's trying to be the new, at least the de facto standard when communicating between various LLMs and various applications or services and things like that. So we've seen that we've had things like Zapier and other automation tools that have brung in bits and pieces, various integrations and things like that, like Andy pointed out. But this is taking it from the LLM side of things, the LLM point of view, right? Using that as the basis of all the work that you're going to be doing. Now, this is a space or field or niche or whatnot of the AI landscape that needed to be addressed, right? If we wanted a more open protocol to communicate to these various tools, as opposed to being more siloed in, like you're only going to use OpenAI in their environment, you're only going to use Anthropic in their environment, and so on and so forth, it's really going to silo people's use and even creativity in being able to find or build more specific solutions, because not all LLMs are good at the exact same things, right? And that's why we have different foundational AI. So MCP is really exciting in that sense from the point of view of the LLM. Now, what we'll talk about later, and I know Brian's got a bit of a demo to show, is what the parallels, like Andy had pointed out, between things that N8N is doing, how it, and functionally how some of the things that MCP comes in, and that becomes a more of a N8N versus MCP debate of how much time and energy you want to spend into it, right? But I think overall, if there is enough progress, developers, and commitment from these services that want to make sure they have an MCP connection out there so that their services can be accessed and used, then that's going to become a de facto standard, right? And once there's enough people using it, then that's that's almost as good as having an IEEE or ISE standard accreditation or things like that.
And I think, and welcome Brian for joining us today. So Junmi, I think that's the big key, right? If it becomes the standard, because right now, yes, everybody's jumping on it, but no one knows if that is going to be the true standard, if that's what everyone's going to be built towards. Because if OpenAI drops their standard, what happens, right? Or if Google drops theirs, or a third party says just does it better, then that could become the de facto too. So it just, everyone's jumping on it at the moment. But I did want to showcase, and I know Brian potentially has the N8N potential demo of that from a MCP side, but it actually ties it all in. And I just wanted to showcase a bit of the Greg Eisenberg video. Do you have that up, Beth?
I do. What's the timestamp you want me to put?
3:42.
Okay, here we go.
Although my video feels better now. For me, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it does feel better.
You know what it was? I was on 480, and that's what it was. So I went up to 1080, and I'm like, oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
You weren't using enough bandwidth. You were driving too slow on the freeway.
I was, yes.
That's what it was.
I was it's too less of a bandwidth. Okay. I can share it too, right. but yeah, I'll just wait for you.
Cool. Here we go. Awesome. Yes. And
okay. So what I just wanted to showcase here was on the left, and it's a really good video, definitely worth watching because it's really good explanation on it. So large language models by themselves cannot actually take any action. Like, you can ask questions against it, it'll provide you an answer, but that's relatively it. In the second part there, and what you've kind of seen in our episode at N8N, I don't know the number of that episode, but I think
December 6th is when we did the MCP episode. I don't know the episode number, but it was December 6th.
Yeah. So Jude, that's your task today, because I see you online. So you have like a minute to give us the number of the episode.
Him or Cisco are usually faster than me at finding, which is nuts.
Yeah. So very disappointed you haven't said anything yet.
Brian, Carl, do you want me to play this?
No. It's too long. What I just wanted to show it, because they have the good graph here. So on the left-hand side is the large language model by itself cannot take action. The large language model, the second piece there is in our N8N episode, you can start seeing that you can connect quote unquote agents to tools, right? So you can have it send, receive, review emails, review, send, get, Airtable, get potentially your CRM connected to a whole different hosts. And you've seen these octopus type agents that can do a lot of different things, quote unquote. But every single tool there, so tool 1 could be email, tool 2 could be your CRM, tool 3 could be search. You have to actually do a lot of work to build every single one of those pieces. And obviously, the more you build, the higher likelihood there is a potential to be a problem, an issue, a break, right? So tool 1, tool 2, tool 3. And you have to trust that the quote unquote large language model, and in N8N's case, the agent, can really understand what you're trying to do and execute it correctly. What is the reliability of that? I don't know. It depends on the use case. And, if you ever watch any of the N8N videos, it seems like, oh, it works all the time. But when you build it yourself, it's like, it doesn't work as flawlessly as you think, or the examples are different, right? So, but this is where MCP comes in, where you don't have to do that individual creation of every single that tool, that email agent, that contact agent, that CRM agent. You have to do that, because with MCP, it's up to the service to build those out, and the MCP technically just reads what they have. And there's a bunch of videos there that essentially, so service 1 could be Gmail, right? And through MCP, the large language model knows that here's all the tools that all the things that you could possibly do with Gmail, and execute it much easier because it's built in that standard, as Junmi was talking about. But the question is that the standard? Is MCP the standard across the board? And we're really, 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 really early right now. So there isn't just this is it, this is what everyone builds against. We don't know that. MCP is pretty hot. Everyone's building against it. But if you actually look at the number of services available, it's quite a bit. But when I tested it just purely on Visual Code Studio, it works sometimes, but it's not flawless. And there's a lot of things that you still need to do. Now, I'm curious. I haven't touched it with N8N just because I haven't really found a use case that I would use. But yeah, pass it on. Anybody have any comments on that?
Well, I was just going to add to what you said, and Beth, you brought it down off the screen, but it's okay if you don't want to, but you can bring it back up and go back to like 16:16 in that video, because in that freeze frame, you'll see like the bigger part of the whiteboard that, let me get his name right, Roz Mick, M-I-C. That's the gentleman at the top of the screen. And if you go to like 16:16, you will see the
you're not having success right now. Your offer probably sucks. That's the reality of it.
And into the ad we go.
If you can or mousse a muffin, that is the secret.
That's okay. When we're done, let's see.
The average person listening.
Got it.
There we go. And it's okay if you can't see, but at the bottom there, what you're seeing is he does a great job after the top part here, where he's showing the evolution of LLM to LLM attached to tools to MCP, which is that middle layer. going out to services at the top, as you just explained, Carl. At the bottom here, he's sort of breaking out that MCP idea where you have the client on the left side. The protocol is that first line there. And then you have what you see as the MCP server and then the service out there. So that's sort of like a blown up view of just the little lines you see at the top. And I just think he did. I fully agree. Other people said it in the comments too. You should absolutely go watch this video. You can see the title out there. Model Context Protocol clearly explained why it matters by Greg Eisenberg. Great video. Not really because of Greg, although he's great too. It's Roz here at the top who does just a phenomenal job of breaking it down, clearly has an understanding of it. And towards the end of the video, as he explains this, he also really dives in like a lot of them do. Another gentleman I watched, Simon Scopes, who sort of breaks down why this, like you were saying, Carl, why this may or may not be the right solution. And I think that's really important. Not only are we early with MCP, and it could be, you guys might have already said this, I came in a little late. It could be a VHS versus Betamax type situation where we don't quite know which technology. They're both viable, but we don't know which one is going to ultimately be the accepted protocol. And Roz was talking on this video. Go ahead, Beth.
So my question is, can the work that you do for one be useful for the other? Like, are you doing the work to be able to identify the points of the service, right? The thing that you're going to create the node for. You've already done that analysis. You know how to build a server maybe between it. Like, I'm wondering if it turns out that there's a better model context protocol, or there's a better whatever that will be called, if that if some of what you're doing to put this together is invested, right? Like, you can use the same thing.
I can guess. Obviously, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a coder, so I can't say. Obviously, I'm not building the server side of it. What I would suspect are some of these building blocks, and where Jimmy and I were talking last night on the call, as we were sort of preparing for the show, is there has to be some what's the word I'm looking for? There has to be some common knowledge. It's not the word I'm looking for, but some common language used across. For instance, even inside MCP, even though that protocol is, the idea of it is to make it easier for an AI agent to go to the service and get back a result without having to do highly complex prompting. If you've seen any of the examples of where we've shown a Jarvis built inside of N8N, those look sexy. They will break often. That is not a solution that I would ever try to deploy to a client, because the chances of it working all the time, or even 50% of the time, are near impossible. They look great on a screen. Look at what it can talk to anything from this chatbot. Well, if you really dive into the prompting on the back end, that prompting has to be, when this type of thing is asked, there's a decision tree that says, go use this tool. This is the best tool for it, and come back. In MCP, the idea is that it solves for that. How does it solve for that? Well, on the server side, Google, if you're doing like a Google or Slack, which would be, I guess, Salesforce or whatever, whoever's in charge of that, is actually embedding the prompting that would be best used. And there's usually, as Jimmy and I were seeing last night, a list of tools. So what you basically have is the, hey, AI, hey, LLM, I'm already embedding on this side how you should use this service. And if I make updates, well, then I just update the list of tools. If Google comes out with a new tool or buys a new company, and down the road, the G Drive, the Google Suite expands by another service, the cool side is that from an MCP side, you would not have to do anything on the LLM side. You would not technically have to add any more to your prompting to use this net new tool that was added. Google took care of that. That's not the way that works right now. But here's the problem. Even right now, Jimmy and I literally ran into this last night, why you would have to be hesitant with MCP right now if you were deploying this for a client, is there's not a consistency in how it says to go and list the tools. Sometimes that's literally called list the tools. And so that's what the AI knows what to go do. And other times when they're third-party built, Jimmy and I were running, Jumi was running into issues with getting it updated on our server side because this has to be locally hosted, simply because the way they said it was not the same way that Google said it, was not the same way that Slack said it. And that's going to have to be all ironed out. So back to your question, Beth, like, if you're building today for MCP, are you hedging your bets that what you're doing is because you think MCP will be the predominant accepted protocol and everybody's going to go that way? I said it on a call earlier today. It's the Tesla supercharger connector, right? Everybody came out, Leaf, my car, I have a Bolt, other ones, the CSS connectors. Ultimately, these big car manufacturers decide to go the route of this Tesla charger. Why? Because of the Tesla charging network, the supercharging network. And so they're consolidating that to one standard. However, because you're building out and dealing how the tools, because I don't have a knowledge, and I don't know if you guys do, if you have the technical knowledge on this, I don't know if like the way that's built out is directly applicable. If OpenAI, as I heard Carl say, if OpenAI comes out with their own standard, is it holistically different than MCP, or a lot of the building blocks kind of the same? And what we're really saying is, do you write it this way or do you write it that way? And ultimately the LLM does not care. It's going through the protocol, and all the information that it needs is already on the server side. So lots of upside, but also a lot of uncertainty. Definitely not deployable in most cases. I can't think of a client I have right now where I would suggest an MCP solution. I would still absolutely stay on the side of a tool by tool solution. Let's use the one Jimmy and I used yesterday would be Google Calendar. Just to do a Google Calendar right now, if you drop down underneath it, I could probably find a viewpoint of this. Underneath the AI agent and N8N, you would have to drop down and have 5 tools. One would be to get information. One would be to update date. One would be to delete a calendar invite. One would be to create a net new one. One might be to add notes. Those are all different tools. And in the prompting, you would have to suggest where to go to make those different things in a chat or a Telegram or whatever. MCP is trying to solve for that. And it will.
Chad is asking, now that we've gone super deep, can we pull back again and do a little, specifically at requested, a weave back to the 101 level? So let's just orient again, and then I know you have demos. Yeah.
Yeah, when you go to the 101 level, like if you take the N8N out of it, the whole point is going back to, can you enable, it's like it goes back to the agency perspective. Can you enable a large language model to essentially take action? That is the whole point of this whole thing, right? That's why N8N was built. That's why all these AI agencies or AI automation companies are trying to come out, and essentially AI agents is a big thing. Is we want AI to essentially do stuff for us. The example is always going to be Jarvis, always going to be her, everything like that. So but the question is, in the video, it's a really good point, because they're talking about Manus, right? Everything's, Manus was the hot thing. But essentially what they mentioned was that Manus was essentially still a large language model with a whole bunch of tools connected to it. And there's a lot of engineering that had to happen. And if something like that goes wrong, they have an engineering team to come in and try to fix that, right? It still doesn't run off like a protocol. So, but my question is, with what the AI labs are building, and Anthropic went one way with MCP, is that where all the other labs are going to go to? Are they going to leverage that as the path towards agents, or are they going to use something different, right? Because OpenAI has gone the operator route, and it seems like Manus is doing the same thing, but a little different. Where are their thoughts on MCP? Is the MCP way of doing things, is there going to be a different MCPs coming out, or is it going to be a completely different way? And this is why it's kind of early, because we don't know where everyone's moving towards and how then everybody else is going to build around that, right? Because you have OpenAI just releasing their SDK, right? And their like their swarm. So you could build it that way, and it's very, very specific still. But that's the question is I honestly I don't know. We don't know where it's gonna go. So that's why when I saw these videos, I was like, it's a little early to go down that route, don't you think? It's like it's taken a pretty big gamble, especially if you're building a lot on it. It's like we're gonna stake our claim. Like, that's exactly why Brad said that is not a good idea to stake your claim here because one, it doesn't work properly yet. And you need everyone else, like when you talk about standard of communications, the standard has to be the same for every single server or I mean service. If they
Yeah.
don't build it the same, then you're gonna get these weird like it kind of calls one thing, but it doesn't call it calls Gmail one way and then Microsoft another way. It's like it won't be usable outside of your own like personal use that you know how to fix and so on.
So let me jump in here real quick. So I have a little bit of a pushback, but if from a top-down view, essentially what this is your tried and true proprietary versus open source, right? So Anthropic has had a sort of open source or fair use kind of bent, right? And one of the things that them, doubling down on MCP or bringing out MCP is because it is a protocol. So while we talk about communications and things like that are still askew, it's more about like what Brian was saying is it's terminology. Here is a set list of terms. Use these this way, but the protocol itself is the standard, right? Model context protocol. So how it's built and the way it accesses things, that's standardized. What really isn't standardized and what really is the early adopting side of this is it's in the wild. There is not there isn't a concerted effort, or there isn't a concerted example of this is the way that you need to display things. So the biggest problem that we ran into when installing these servers, onto our own hosted machine is that every project isn't written, documented, and processed to the same extent. And I was even commenting like, here are the base reference systems that we are supporting in our own, on our own GitHub. And those are the cleanest explanations. Then comes, here are the official third-party implementations. And those are the next level of how clear the deployment and implementation is. And then there's the Wild West of the community, right? Where they say, oh, here's some community projects for, for systems that people or for services that people are interested in. And that's where it goes a little crazy. And that's the hardest part, is to get everyone to properly document. And this is that I have complained about this all my life. This is what everybody complains about in the back end of tech. And of course, no techs want to do it anyways. And that's proper documentation. Institutional memory, people. This is what keeps your institution going. But yes, and that's the hardest part. Now, combine that with, this is not in a place for non-technical people. If you do not have a background in what all of these services are, being able to, work with installers like NPM, if you don't know what that is, you've got an extra hurdle to go. Right. And that's what the biggest things about the automations and the integrations and the interconnectiveness is. Those have been designed and have been around enough to where they've become more no code, right? Whereas this is definitely a low code, nitty gritty side of things. What hopefully sooner than later, as it becomes a standard, because it's, anything can be a standard if there's enough people working in it. So if there's a billion people all working in MCP, it doesn't matter what the other AI companies are doing. There's a billion people working on this. Now to go back to the whole open source proprietary thing, if we look at the strategies of what other providers are doing, or other foundational AI, OpenAI may not even touch something like an MCP. Why? Because they're going to build their entire package, right? They want an environment that you live in, right? You go to ChatGPT, and so you can use your canvas, and you'll eventually use your video generation, your image generation, and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to do it remotely, use their API or whatever their package is. So that's what's it's really gonna kind of work out to be, I think, is it's just clear lines. We want you with us living in our environment. They want to become a Microsoft. I know that's a terrible
I
terrible
really think
analogy.
I think remember someone said, who was it that said that the whole point, I think it was Dan Shipper, that says like they kind of want them to be an OS because it's like Canvas kind of is your word, right? And then you have data. One thing, Juni, really funny thing that came up to my head. If I was working for a SaaS company, you know what I would do? I would essentially create a service for our SaaS, enable it for MCP, and go to IT and be like, hey, guess what, guys? I created this. And purely just to see the look on their face once they realize what I actually did. And then I have a big grin on my face with a big frown on the other side.
Yeah, we used to call in firefighting, if you were a freelancer, you were called Lance, and it was probably the worst term you could be called if you were on a fire scene. If anybody called you Lance, it was not a good thing at all, because it meant that you might have gone off and done your own thing. And that's what it makes me think of, Carl, is like the IT department identifies you as Lance, meaning that you're now going rogue and showing them what you could do with MCP, which is definitely going around what they probably want to build and control and stuff like that. So you're probably their worst nightmare, showing up, like you said, big smile
Carl,
on your face.
I appreciate your rebel spirit, but that would seriously be like, oh, he's done it again.
We got this guy.
Revoke all credentials. Get out of here.
The thing is, though, no one else would know exactly what I was talking about except for IT and me, and only some people in IT.
Yeah, maybe everybody in IT.
Maybe
right,
they're like, I don't know what he just did. And the thing is, if you told my manager, it'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't verify any of this. So you're out of luck. Anyway,
because you've had this experience, right? Like Carl has had this conversation with many managers. It's just the role of MCP was played by a different technology in the previous times.
Yeah.
Hey, I know there was a question, and I wanted to at least bring this up really quick, because you said that in chat they were asking us to maybe roll back a little bit, Beth. So here's a good visual, and I'll explain it. It's okay if you're just listening to us. I'll explain it really quick. But I'm back in N8N, and I literally, while you were saying to step back a bit, Beth, I went into our daily AI show N8N experience, and I went and literally looked for a template. This is like kind of what the best part of N8N is to me, is that you can go find templates and deploy them pretty quickly. Now you're going to see red marks all over it because I didn't literally connect this to our instance of like Google and stuff, but this is good enough just to explain why this might be different than like an MCP process. So if we look here, this is pretty easy. We have a chat to start. We have our AI agent. This is sort of unique to N8N and the way they do this. If we drop down on the left, this is the model that we're using. We might use, we might use Mini or something like that, for a Mini or something. We have just the basic memory set in here. That's just making sure that when you're in the chat here, if I open the chat, that's just making sure that there's some memory to the last thing I said. If you don't have this here and you don't connect it, what ends up happening is you can say, what's the weather in Tampa today? And it'll tell you. And then if you said, and what about tomorrow? It'd be like, and what about what? like a goldfish. Like, well, what about what? What are we talking about? So you have to have memory attached to that if you want any sort of like continuous conversation. And you can quickly set up how far you want it to remember, how many lines, things like that. But that's just like setting up this right here. These 3 things right here are just setting up a basic chat. This is literally ChatGPT. Go ask it a question, it gives you back an answer. Go back and ask a question, and it gives you an answer. Okay, but now we've added tools, which is what it says right here in the middle. It says we're adding tools. So now we're not just going and asking a question to OpenAI. In this chat here, you're going to see that there's a system message, and you're a helpful assistant. Current timestamp is now. Okay, fine. But what you have to do when you set this up is, in this particular case, it looks like we're going over to the sheets, and that's been connected. But you'll notice here, it's get transactions by status, get transactions by product name, get all transactions. And then they have this sub workflow that's called record by date, or records by date, which is actually this workflow down here. When the AI agent, the LLM, decides that it needs this, you should see it like start spinning. And then it's going to drop down here and automatically run this, bring this back up here, and then kick it back out to the chat method. It should be whatever your answer would be, should be back here in the chat. Okay. MCP has more to do with this right here, because instead of seeing these 3 here, you would literally just see a tool that, and the way you set up with MCP, but it would just be Google Sheets. It wouldn't say get this or find this transaction or open new sheet. It quite literally would just say Google Sheets on it as the MCP on it. And in fact, we could probably, if we switch back over to this tab instead, you can see here in terms of reference servers, this is for MCP. We have Drive and Maps, but I think Google Sheets probably is a little bit farther down here in terms of third party. And Jimmy was just talking about this, about how things up in this area, the reason you keep seeing so many examples on YouTube with Brave, it's because Brave is one of the easiest MCPs to set up. It gives you we set it up. Jimmy did it in like 5 minutes. It gives you almost no trouble. So is anybody shocked that that's the MCP examples we keep seeing on YouTube? Nope, because Slack, although Slack gave us trouble, Drive and things like that. But let's go back to our example over here. This is all replaced because the idea is Google, on the Google Sheets side of the MCP service, has already given the instructions as well as the prompting that it would need and the tools available: get, record, create new, right? All the things, update row, retrieve row, all the things you would want to do with a Google Sheets connector. But you're only going to see it's all being built out, and Google manages that. You don't, meaning the user who's building this. So you don't have to go into this AI agent or the model and specifically say that I want you to do and go create a new row when I want to do this thing. The chat should just be able to quickly this OpenAI chat should be able to run through that MCP pretty quickly. And once it starts talking to MCP, it has what we asked for in the chat. It runs it over to the Google client. It knows what tools it has. It knows what prompts to preempt in there or add to it. And so you're just getting the answer back on the website. This is the hope and dreams of MCP, is that it should be so easy. And we're going to get there one way or the other, whether it's through MCP or somebody else comes out with something faster. Like why is API the way it is with an API key and a secret key? Why is that the way it is? I'm assuming at some point it won out over all other choices, right, for API. But it's not like API is the only way. We also have OAuth, right? So there's other ways to do it. So it might not even be that MCP or not MCP. It's not like black or white. It could be like SQL or JavaScript or Python, or I don't know, I'll say C+, and I might be wrong about that on whether that would be a viable thing, but we'll use Python and JavaScript. I'm not a coder. Right, but there's several different languages. They all have their pluses and minuses. And so what we might actually see in the future is not that just one to rule them all, although that might be nice. What we might see is that there's 2 or 3 that are very, very good at specific use cases. Maybe one of them excels at math, which would be phenomenal. And so for any analytics tools, you might use this other protocol, not MCP. But MCP is really great at telling a chat bot what to do. So you're like, for any chat instances, anything where I'm going to deploy this on a website or whatever, this thing is awesome, because like no matter what my client or potential customer asks on a website, it does not falter. It always knows how to go get the answer from them. That would be a great solution for maybe MCP. So just want to throw that out there, that the answer is we don't know, because the world hasn't sort of decided. Not enough of this has been built, and it's catching fire. That's why we're having a show about it right now, when we already had a show about it in December. But we don't know. And anybody that tells you that they know definitively that MCP is the one and all solution is lying, because there's no way that they can know that. They're hedging bets like anybody else. And so it does kind of suck on the server side if you're Google or whatever, because you probably do have to, over the next couple of months, build out a few different ones of these, because you don't know which one is ultimately going to be the one that the users of NAN, or the builders of NAN, ultimately want to use.
I want to bring in, I want to ask a question to Andy here about this, because I've been watching a lot of, because I know you was former COO and CTO about this from an enterprise level, and then Junmi as well. What your thoughts are on the deployment of, let's say, your Google's one thing, but let's say your SaaS, and your thoughts are, hey, is this something that we want to deploy from a service side? And then on the other side, is this something we want to adopt? More so because I've been watching a lot of these TikTok videos on ERPs, and how ERPs, especially on the enterprise side, like their whole goal was to ensure that everything is integrated. But I'm seeing that an MCP is a kind of small microcosm of this, as how AI is preventing that type of end-to-end integration that enterprises and businesses want, which is part of the massive disruption that AI is actually playing into.
Okay. We've been talking a lot about this needing to become the standard in order for it to be a utility out there. I'm going to say, I want to change the word a little bit. I'm going to say it's a standardized method of integrating LLMs with tools. That's very important in the context of the enterprise that you're suggesting here, Carl, because it's not just external cloud service providers that can create an MCP server that makes it easier for you to connect to, or connect your LLM to that external cloud service. If you're inside the enterprise and you want to connect and integrate different components of your system stack, you can write an MCP server. You don't even have to write it. You can ask Claude to write it and then just mount it locally. And that MCP server now can interconnect all of your systems in a way that the large language model, and let's use Claude as the example here. Let's say I'm running Claude desktop at my workstation, and I've connected it to the MCP server that my IT department has built that connects my financial ERP to my e-commerce platform.
That Carl built, not IT built, that Carl built.
Oh, that Carl, yeah, okay, so one guy, one guy. And that's all it takes anymore, right? You don't need an full IT department and programmers to do it. This is a simpler way. And in a moment, I want to talk about how it compares to the emergence of application programming interfaces that allowed people to access servers out there with a standardized method. But they're not all the same. All the APIs are the same. But let me set that aside for a minute. So now, what this enables inside the enterprise, if you chose to move forward with MCP, is, standard be damned. This is a tool set that allows me to take Claude desktop distributed on, or OpenAI desktop, ChatGPT, all around my company, and provide authenticated access to anybody who wants to talk to our system across multiple services within our system. That's the promise of this thing. And it's driven largely by this need to progress beyond APIs. And that is, now you want a conversational interface. APIs are not conversational. In the cloud model of APIs, you have a service provider that wants to get you to pay for their service. Well, you pay for an API key from them to get access to that. And then you're going to pay for every interaction through that API. But they publish exact listings of what the API can do. And they're limited, right? So you can't go in and look in the back end of that cloud service provider's operations. You can only do a get or a post or those kinds of actions. And they define exactly what the API languaging has to be in the code in order to do those processes. MCP simplifies all that, but with a specific bent toward large language models and their ability to interact with the MCP server and interpolate between what used to be a complex API and now server code within the MCP server that figures out how to access and interact with any one of the systems that you want to build. I actually have an example I did on Claude last night, which is building a travel planner. And Claude showed me how to actually go through and set up an MCP server. But like someone said here, this is not the province for people who are going to be no code or low code people. You do have to, mount a local instance. You have to add NPM and JavaScript. You have to load a bunch of different packages on the thing, but all of those packages together can be delivered by, a coding LLM for you, and you basically just copy and paste them in. Nonetheless, it's a very complex process. I didn't even begin to do it, but I want to, because this thing is giving me explicit instructions on how to set up an MCP server that will allow me to just go to Claude and say, I want to plan a trip to New England in June, and I want to do these 3 stops. I'm kind of flexible on these days. And then the LLM can reason through that process and interact with the tools I've set up for it. But those tools, by the way, you have to either find free tools on the web to do it, or you have to provide the authentication credentials so that you can access those external tools. But both of those routes are possible. So I just wanted to say one thing in my long exposition there, and that is, it's not only about other providers adopting the standard. You can use MCP right now to connect your tools internally or externally.
And I think that's another $1 billion idea right there, because think of how many times, and anybody who's worked in SaaS, one of the big questions is, hey, what is the current situation with our tool, with the service, the thing it provides? And what I think a lot of internal teams always think about is, or never do, is actually interact with the product. Outside of the actual product team, a lot of the people around or support and do other things don't normally interact with that product on a regular basis. But if you've set up an MCP and configured your SaaS in a way that can provide feedback to you, that opens up a lot of different doors that is much different than, I'm kind of speechless on just all the thoughts that are coming through my head. And I don't know, Junmi, if that's something that, like, what would IT security think about that? Because if an MCP has been set up, that if once that thing gets out, anyone can technically access your system in various different ways to make it do things.
Right. I think the answer to your question there for enterprise implementation is sort of along the lines of what Andy was talking about. If it's in your sandbox, you're good to go, right? The main issue when it comes to data compliance is it leaving, right? And making sure that you have the right access protocols. And any IT worth their salt is going to look at it that way. It's like, okay, here's our access control list. This is where we can implement this. But I see an entire ecosystem within the enterprise where you're running everything. There's no reason to call outside of your own system. You can run your own LLM. You can run your own MCP, and that's the interconnector. I forget who it was who quoted, it's the USB-C connector, the standardized connector that you can plug in all of your devices, aka services and tools that's within your system. Just like N8N can be locally hosted, right? It can be hosted within the enterprise. That's in an automation layer. So this is all complete packages that can live within your environment, your ecosystem, that doesn't have to communicate with the outside, which in a watered down version, you can do in your own desktop. You can use these examples for your own desktop. You run your own your open source LLM. You have automation. You have MCP for connecting to all the services that you use. And you can then have all of that agent or agentic capabilities on board. And then from there, it's, sky high and all that.
Let me add just a little bit about that example that I was talking about with the travel planner, because I think it's interesting. In the chat, somebody's saying that there's a service out there, Cove, that will do what I just described. And yeah, but you have to pay for it. It's not free. Yes, in answer to the question there, yeah, I would be building it for free. And one of the things that Claude suggested was here's a list of different services: flight data, hotel data, car rental data. They all have free tiers, so you can do it on a limited number of times. So you could set them up with that. And I said, well, wait a second. Why can't I just use web search to go out and find the things? And I don't care about having it actually book them for me. I just wanted to create the itinerary and all the flights and hotels that I'm going to do. So it said, oh, that's a good idea. Yes, you can do that. And here's how to do it. So it's completely free. And it'll generate that itinerary and so on. And so there are lots of different ways to articulate it. And then Claude will literally tell you how to configure the MCP server so that it does exactly that. But it's a tedious process, as any kind of sort of, low code or no code programming is. And there's possibilities that it could take me a couple of days or even a week to finally fit that into my schedule to make it happen. And it would be very much faster for me to go to Cove and pay the small amount of money and do it. And so I'm not going to eliminate the viability of these SaaS services, because the coding overhead, even with tools like LLMs to support me and with MCP as a way of basically creating a programmatic approach to a single agentic task that I want. Right? That MCP server has a name, Travel Planner. And now I can connect Claude to Travel Planner. And anytime I ask Claude to plan a trip for me, it's going to use the Travel Planner because it has that in its tool set. That's the beauty of that. But you can also do it in N8N. You could build a similar kind of workflow process in N8N. And you can also just, call your travel agent.
So I want to end today's show by echoing what Roz from Greg Eisenberg's video, that if you are technically inclined, then definitely opportunity to experiment. But even if you're not, it's definitely something to pay attention to, right? If you want to start a business or use it for your business, because I think what the weight is for a standard that everybody is using. We're not sure what that standard is. Could be MCP, could be something else, but it's very, very important to pay attention to this, because once everyone starts building around whatever it is, that's when huge opportunities are. So remember, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe or follow wherever you're watching, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much for all our folks who attended live. We always love you. And don't forget to go to the dailyaistrategies.com to get our newsletter where we get even more information and news about AI. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll be back tomorrow with our 2-week recap.
Aloha.